In 2007, a homeowner in Kingston, Ontario, fixed a tiny pinhole leak in one of his water lines. No big deal. Took 20 minutes. 2 months later, another leak appeared less than 2 feet away. Same pipe, same fitting. So he looked it up online and discovered something that made his stomach drop. The brass fittings connecting his plumbing weren't just failing. They were dissolving from the inside out. And the plumber who installed them never said a word about it. That homeowner is one of thousands. And if your house was built or remodeled anytime after 1995, there's a real chance the same thing is happening behind your walls right now. Here's what's going on. Over the past 2 decades, the American construction industry quietly replaced copper plumbing with something called PEX. That stands for cross-linked polyethylene, and it's basically flexible plastic tubing. Red lines for hot water, blue lines for cold. You've probably seen it if you've ever looked under a sink in a newer home. PEX is now installed in more than 60% of new homes built in the United States. Builders love it because it's roughly half the cost of copper and dramatically faster to install. A plumber can snake PEX tubing through walls and around corners without soldering a single joint. A full replumb that would take days with copper can be done in hours with PEX. And here's the thing, the tubing itself is mostly fine. PEX pipe is flexible, freeze-resistant, and doesn't corrode the way metal does. The industry will tell you it lasts 50 years or more, and in many cases, that's probably true. But the pipe isn't the problem. The problem is the tiny brass fitting that connects one section of PEX to another. The elbow, the T-joint, the coupling. These fittings cost as little as $2 or $3 each at any big box hardware store. And in millions of American homes, they are slowly eating themselves alive. The issue is a chemical process called dezinsification, and the conditions that trigger it are disturbingly common. Brass is an alloy made from copper and zinc. In high-quality brass fittings, the zinc content stays below 15%. But cheaper fittings, the kind that got installed by the millions during the housing boom of the early 2000s, used what's called yellow brass. Yellow brass contains up to 35% zinc, and when water flows through it, especially water that's acidic, highly chlorinated, or mineral-heavy, the zinc starts to leach out of the metal. Hot water accelerates the process, which is why hot water lines tend to fail first. Regions with hard water or high chlorine levels are hit especially hard. Areas using Colorado River water, parts of Texas, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, and scattered municipalities across the country have all reported elevated failure rates. If your local water utility adds extra chlorine, which many do, your fittings are corroding faster than average. Think of it like bone density loss. But for your plumbing, the fitting looks perfectly normal on the outside. You could stare right at it and never know anything was wrong. But inside, the zinc is dissolving molecule by molecule, leaving behind a porous copper shell that gets weaker every single year. The dissolved zinc reforms as zinc oxide, a white powdery residue that builds up inside the fitting like plaque in an artery. It chokes off water flow gradually, so gradually you might not notice for years. And the fitting itself becomes so brittle that one cold snap, one spike in water pressure, one bump from a pipe hanger shifting in the wall, and it doesn't just leak, it cracks clean through. One homeowner on a building science forum described grabbing a fitting to straighten a PEX line and watching it snap like a toothpick. He had 50 fittings buried 5 feet underground. 4 had already failed in a 2-month span. His estimated repair bill was $20,000. When these fittings go, you don't get a slow drip under the sink. You get a full pressure flood behind drywall, under floors, in crawl spaces where nobody looks for months. The first major manufacturer to get caught was Zurn Industries. Their F1807 brass fittings were installed in homes across America from 1996 through 2010. Those fittings were made with yellow brass alloys, specifically UNS C3000, 600, and C37700, that were especially prone to dezinsification. A class action lawsuit was filed, and Zurn eventually settled for $20 million. You can identify these fittings by the letters QPEX stamped on the side. But Zurn wasn't alone. Nibco, another major manufacturer, reached a $43.5 million settlement over failures in their PEX tubing, fittings, and clamps. Their Dura-PEX line was known for splitting and leaking into wall cavities, causing damage that stayed invisible until it soaked through the drywall. Kitech, a Canadian manufacturer, settled for $90 million after their brass fittings failed in homes across North America. And in August of 2025, a brand new class action was filed against Uponor, one of the biggest names in the PEX industry. The lawsuit alleges that Uponor's red, white, and blue Aquapex piping systems are defective and can fail within 3 to 10 years after installation. Not because of the brass this time, because of the way antioxidants are mixed into the polyethylene during manufacturing. The lawsuit claims the mixture isn't uniform, which means some sections of pipe degrade faster than others. Uponor has never issued a recall. The company told at least one homeowner that his water pressure was too high, even though every reading in the house came in well below the 80 pounds per square inches threshold set by the Uniform Plumbing Code. So here's the picture. You have an entire generation of homes plumbed with materials that multiple courts have determined are prone to premature failure. Over $150 million in class action settlements have been paid out, and the typical homeowner has no idea any of this happened. The reason most people don't know is pretty simple. These failures happen slowly, behind walls, in places nobody looks. Your first clue might be a gradual drop in water pressure that you write off as a municipal issue, or a faint musty smell in a closet that you blame on humidity. By the time you see water stains on your ceiling, the fitting may have been weeping for months. If you want to check your own home, there are a few things to look for. Open the panel to your water heater and look at the PEX connections. If you see a white, chalky residue on any brass fitting, that's zinc oxide. That means dezinsification is already happening. If your fittings have a yellowish brass color rather than a reddish one, you're looking at high zinc yellow brass. And if anything is stamped QPEX or made by Kitech, those fittings are specifically named in court documents. Now, the industry quietly started fixing this years ago. Most PEX manufacturers switched to dezinsification-resistant brass, commonly called DZR brass, which keeps the zinc below 15%. Others moved to engineered plastic fittings made from PPSU, which eliminates the metal corrosion problem entirely. If you walk into a supply house today, the fittings on the shelf are probably fine. But nobody went back and told the homeowners with the old fittings. Nobody knocked on doors. Nobody sent letters. The settlements paid cents on the dollar for actual damage, and the companies moved on. Meanwhile, your grandparents' house with the original copper plumbing from 1962 is still running without a single leak. Copper pipes routinely last 50 to 70 years. They resist bacterial growth. They don't need antioxidant stabilizers or special brass alloys. They cost more upfront. Absolutely. A copper replumb runs $8,000 to $10,000 versus $4,000 to $6,000 for PEX. But if you factor in one catastrophic fitting failure, the water damage remediation, the mold abatement, the drywall replacement, copper suddenly looks like the bargain. That's the trade the modern construction industry made on your behalf without asking. They saved a few $1,000s per house on plumbing, and you inherited the risk of a $3 fitting turning your living room into a swimming pool. So if you're buying a home, ask what fittings were used, not just what piping. If you already own a home built after 1995, take 15 minutes and inspect every accessible fitting with a flashlight. And if you're building new, ask your plumber about DZR brass or PPSU fittings by name, because the guys cutting corners aren't going to bring it up on their own. If this kind of deep dive into what's really going on behind your walls is useful to you, hit subscribe. We cover the stuff about modern construction that nobody else wants to talk about.